Okay, I'm going to be reading you the story from your big book. This is a story that goes along with the story that you have on photocopy that you've been reading. You weren't able to take home this book, so I'll be reading this story to you. I think you'll enjoy this story. It's from the Frog and Toad stories. It's from the book Frog and Toad Are Friends. And the name of the story we're going to be reading today is A Lost Button. From the title of the story, we get the idea that somebody lost a button. So we can kind of predict to begin with whether we think they're going to find the button in the story or not. I'll say yes, they're going to. What do you think? Okay, this story was written by Arnold Lobel. We see from the story that the genre is fantasy. Do you remember what a fantasy is? It's a story that could not really happen, and I can just hear you say, and the characters wear clothing and talk, and animals don't wear clothing and don't talk. That's one of the things that makes this story a fantasy. Let's see what happens. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked in the woods. They walked along the river. At last they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." Okay, when Toad says, "Oh, drat," do you remember we talked about you can understand what a character is feeling from their words? He doesn't come out and say how he feels, but when he says, "Oh, drat," does that tell us he's happy? No. Usually when we say, "Oh, drat," we're upset about something. So he must be very upset that he lost his button. Would you be? "Don't worry," said Frog. "We will go back to all the places where we walked. We will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow. They began to look for the button in the tall grass. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button is black. My button is white." Toad put the black button in his pocket. Okay, from this page, we can tell a little bit about the character of Frog. Frog says not to worry. So is a person who says don't worry, is he upset? Usually not. That person usually shows that they are calm and they're patient. They can take the time and work their problems out. Okay, we've been saying that we think he's going to find the button. I thought he'd find the button by now. He still hasn't, but I think I'll keep on saying he's going to find that button. What about you? Let's see. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button? I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button had 4 holes." Toad put the button with 2 holes in his pocket. They went back to the woods and looked in the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," cried Toad. That button is small. My button was big." Toad put the small button in his pocket. Okay, again, we can tell how he feels. One of the words that he uses is cried. "That is not my button," cried Toad. So does it sound like he's still upset? I think so. But I'm still predicting he's going to find that button. A raccoon came out from behind a tree. "I heard that you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I just found." "That is not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," shouted Toad. "That button is thin. My button is thick." Is he still upset? What words tell you? What words let you know that Toad is still upset? It says that he shouts, doesn't he? Before it said he wailed. What does wailed mean? I think we've talked about this word before. That means cried. He cried, and now he's shouting. So he must be very upset. Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed, "The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine." Toad ran home and slammed the door. There on the floor he saw his white, four-holed, big, round, thick button. "Oh," said Toad, "it was here all the time. What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog." Okay, is he still upset? Okay, first, on page 150, he sounded like he was doing what sometimes kids do when they're upset about something. What do? They jump up and down and they scream because the things aren't going his way. And he says something. The author here uses an interesting way to express how Toad is feeling. He says the whole world is covered with buttons. Is that true? Is the whole world covered with buttons? It's not, is it? He's exaggerating. It's just like when you tell your parents, "Everyone has one. I want one too." Does everyone have what you want? No. So he was upset and he was using an exaggeration. There is the word button. Remember when we talked about syllables? Every syllable has to have what, guys? A vowel. And what are the vowels? A, E, I, O, U. So how many syllables does button have? How many vowels does it have? It has two vowels, the U and the O. So it has two syllables. And if we divide it into syllables, we get but-ton. But ends with a T. So is that open or closed? Yeah, T is a consonant, so it closes the door. Vowel can't get away. It's closed. What about ton? It ends with an N. That's a consonant, so the vowel is closed. So we have a word with two closed syllables. Had Toad been very unfair to Frog? What had Frog done for Toad? He followed him, didn't he? He helped him to look for the button. And Toad was throwing a temper tantrum. So you think he should be feeling bad about how he acted with Frog? Well, let's see. Toad took all the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought it was beautiful. He put it on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. Okay, here we have another one. How does Frog feel about it? What clue do we have how he feels? He jumped for joy. It's not like what Toad did when he was jumping up and down and screaming. Here he jumps for joy. So it shows us that he is happy to get the jacket. Okay, was my prediction right? Was your prediction right? He found the button, didn't he? It just takes time. And if he had done what Frog had said and had patience, he wouldn't have got so upset. How many times have you all looked for something and thought it was somewhere else and then found out it was right in your house the whole time? Okay, I hope you enjoyed this story. And I will be reading next week's story to you at another time. I hope everything is going well. Guys, don't forget to get on iReady Math and get your minutes in each week, 30 minutes each week. Have a great day, guys. Miss you. Bye.